Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and host of the Dean's Chat podcast. My guest today is a longtime leader in the podiatric profession, Dr. Patrick DeHeer. He is on the Board of Trustees for the American Podiatric Medical Association. He is a residency director, heading up the podiatric surgical residency program at Ascension St. Vincent Hospital in Indianapolis. He's board certified by the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgery. He is a member of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons, Glasgow. And for the past 30 years, he's been the team podiatrist for the Indiana Pacers. Welcome to Dean's Chat, Dr. DeHeer.
Thank you, Dr. Jensen. Glad to be here.
Going with the Dean's Chat, fireside chat theme, I thought it'd be best if we go with first names. How about if you're Patrick and I'm Jeff?
Perfect.
All right. So just to get started, I was wondering if you would share with our listeners your introduction into podiatric medicine and a little bit about your background. I read through your CV, and you are indeed the quintessential leader in our profession, so I left a lot of it out, so I thought you could touch on some of it.
Sure. I went to Indiana University as undergrad, and actually I went to undergrad with the idea of being a dentist, so I was going to go into dentistry. And after my second year, I visited my family dentist, and I realized it wasn't something that I wanted to do. So then I wasn't sure what pathway I wanted to take. I was thinking about going into marine biology, and I talked to my counselor about that, and they recommended a few things. And podiatry was one of the professions that the counselor recommended to me. My dad happened to play golf with a podiatrist in Indianapolis, so I asked if I could visit him. He was great. He allowed me to come and visit him, and he was happy. He loved his job. His patients loved him. He did surgery. He had a normal lifestyle. His patients walked out of his office feeling better. I was like, I could do that. And I also was pretty intrigued about all the different components of podiatric medicine and surgery. I was always big in sports, and I like the sports medicine component of it too. And I really was intrigued by the surgery aspect as well.
It's interesting. I have a similar path too. I was interested in surgery and sports medicine, but I had no idea all the different facets that were available to us in podiatric medicine. I oftentimes mention to the students that the reason they go shadow podiatric medicine docs and they're happy, is because they've tailored their practice to what they like to do.
Yeah, it's a great career. I love it, and I have been incredibly happy with my career, and I wouldn't change it out for anything. It's just been more than I expected.
Very good. So once you decided to go to podiatric medicine, you were at Indiana. How did you decide which school to go to?
This was 1986. I interviewed at a few different schools, and I'm an Indianapolis kid. I grew up in Indianapolis, spent my whole life here, and Scholl was the closest, even though I interviewed at a lot of different schools, and I felt like it was the best fit for me.
Excellent. And then once you got through the 4 years there, obviously education's in your blood, Patrick. I mean, anybody who takes on a residency directorship has got to have mentors, and at some point in their training, likely during residency, they got that education bug. How did that work for you?
Well, my mentor in podiatry was Rick Lundeen. Rick brought arthroscopy into podiatry, and he was well published, and he was one of the top surgeons of his era, I would say. And I had a lot of residency offers from around the country, but I really wanted to train under Rick Lundeen. And so I came back to Indianapolis. It was great that he was in my hometown too. And I worked under him. Back then in Indiana, there were only 1-year residency programs. There weren't any 2-year programs in our state. So I did a fellowship under him before fellowships were even a thing. So it really wasn't anything official, but I wanted an extra year of training under him because he did pretty much all the advanced surgical procedures that were being done at the time. And, even though my 1-year number of procedures, which is pretty close to what most people are graduating with in 3 years now, I still thought, to do those type of procedures, I needed an extra year of training.
That's great. And then so during the fellowship, were you doing just lots of scopes, or was it the whole spectrum?
We did lots of scopes, but I mean, the whole spectrum. He did a fair amount of pediatrics, which I have a true passion for pediatrics now. That's a big part of my practice. I do a lot of pediatric type patient care. And then that's how I also got hooked up through the Pacers through Rick, because Rick was the unofficial team podiatrist for the Pacers. The Pacers also drafted my dad my dad played college basketball and drafted him. So they were familiar with my name because my dad got drafted by them. And then Rick was their unofficial team podiatrist, but then they wanted to have an official team podiatrist. And that's how I ended up in that position too.
Wow. Let's talk about hoops here in a little bit. But I was going to touch base on the residency program. Patrick, I've thought for many years that the unsung heroes in our profession are the residency directors and all the doctors that bring their cases to the hospital to train that next generation of docs. Certainly, being a residency director is a huge responsibility, and you've got a lot of doctors to answer for and train up. Can you talk about your residency program and how you became the residency director, and just a little bit about the program for students or prospective students that are interested in perhaps going to your program?
Sure. I've been in practice for 30 years now after my training. So I've worked with residents my whole career, and I was always the person that did a lot of the rear foot surgery cases that they got their rear foot stuff from me. And I've enjoyed teaching residents, and I've worked with a lot of really talented people over the years. And I never really thought about being a residency director, but one of the two programs in Indianapolis, the spot opened up about 5 years ago. And the residents asked me, they came to me and asked me if I would do it. I really wasn't looking to do another job, honestly. But I love teaching. I always have. I've always been interested in research. I've published a lot of papers. I lecture a lot too. And so that teaching part of me was sort of intrigued by the opportunity. And I decided I could make it. Glad that I did. Even though I've taught residents for 30 years, being a residency director is a different level than being a faculty member. There's a lot more daily contact, a lot more organization, a lot more directing of the educational experience for residents. And this program that I took over was set up really well, but I thought it could go to the next level. And I've really expanded our rotations. I've expanded our faculty at St. Vincent's in Indianapolis as the residency program. We have four 3-year slots. So we have 12 residents, and we usually have 4 to 6 students coming through our program every month too. So we have a pretty good extern clerkship program as well. And the residents with the other programs, the better programs in the country. And the program's really evolved kind of what I pictured it could be. We have just a really nice diversity in training and outstanding numbers. Our residents are usually graduating with about 4 times the minimum number of procedures and cases. And they get a really good experience with pediatrics and trauma, all those sort of subspecialties, and limb salvage too. And I think one of the unique things that our program offers is a really strong inpatient component. The first year is really a lot at the hospital dealing with inpatient care.
That's great. And I know 2 of your graduating residents this year were from the Arizona College, Mark and Dustin, and I know they've secured some phenomenal opportunities in practice in different settings. And in fact, I'm going to have 3 of your residents on this chat next week.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about that.
Me too.
Mark's gone to Tallahassee and working with a former resident from a couple of years ago in their group. They were so excited about Josh Nichols, who was the resident that graduated a couple of years ago. They were really wanting another person from our program to come and join their group. So Mark and Josh are buddies. So that was a natural fit. And then Dustin's a West Coast kid. He wanted to go back out to the West Coast, and he got a really good job in Sacramento. And then my other 2 residents, Tyler Sten's going to Kansas City, and Arva Akram's going to be either a VA in Indiana or a hospital in Indiana. He's still trying to decide between 2 offers.
That's great. And so there's so many opportunities for these young docs coming out, and they're well trained and they're in high demand. So that's great.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for doing that.
There's tremendous opportunity in our field.
So one of my favorite students, Ashley Starr's coming out to join you next month, and I think she's already moved there. So I know she's really excited about it.
I did not think we could get her out of Arizona, but we were able to convince her it was the place for her postgraduate medical education.
You're going to enjoy working with her, and I'm sure that she'll get the most out of your program. So that's great.
It'll be a great addition.
So I'm a huge basketball fan. I've been a Milwaukee Bucks fan since I was a little boy. I remember when they drafted Lou Alcindor, and so 2 years ago when they won the championship, Patrick, it was like, it was the greatest thing ever. So I've known Jim Lucido real well. Jim is the Miami Heat podiatrist. And so when I heard you had spent 30 years with the Indiana Pacers, I've been dying to talk to you about this, because to me that must have just been an incredible experience. And I'm sure our listeners would love to hear more about that.
Sure. It's really dependent upon the trainers, like how much I would do. It varied from year to year. I would say the most active time I was when the Pacers were really good, when they had like Reggie Miller and Rick Smits and Dale Davis and Antonio Davis. I was doing a lot more with them at that point. And then it kind of ebbs and flows from year to year, but it's been really fun. And they changed their orthopedic physician last year, and they decided to make a change, and I was fine. I've done it for 30 years, and I don't know if they actually I don't think they brought in a podiatrist. I think they may have brought in a foot and ankle orthopedic surgeon to replace me, but I was a little bit, surprised by it, but at this point in my career, I was like, that's fine. And then the thing that sort of wrapped it up for me nicely was they had an on-court celebration for me at a game before tip-off and gave me a jersey. I have 2 jerseys now, but one with the number 30 on it to celebrate my 30 years as a team podiatrist. But it's interesting, like, especially when they were really good and they were in the playoffs a lot, there's always a lot of urgency to the things. And I worked with Rick Smits a lot, because Rick Smits had a callus foot structure, and he had neurosurgery in college. So he always had a lot of challenging things from a foot structure standpoint. But I actually treated a lot of the players in that group over a pretty significant period of time, and got to know them. And it was always fun. There's always a lot of fun stories, but they'd either come to my office or they'd have me come to the game or practice to see players as needed. But it's funny, as you get towards the end of the season and playoffs, there's always a lot more pressure to get things done.
Well, I'll bet. I remember the days when they had the huge rivalry with the Knicks, and Reggie Miller was shooting threes, and didn't he have some game where he scored like 11 points in 30 seconds or something?
Oh yeah, yes, that was in Madison Square Garden. Yep. Wow.
That's great. What a great experience. And what a way to put podiatry at the forefront. That's just so fun. I'll bet that was awesome. So Patrick, I had a couple other things I wanted to chat about. One was your mission work in Haiti. You started a program there, and I was wondering if you'd share what putting that together was like, and what you did when you went down there.
Sure. I've actually been on 30 trips around the world. I've been to Haiti the most. I've been to Haiti probably 15 or 16 times. I started going to Haiti initially working on a clubfoot program, and I was working with Kay Wilkins, who's a pediatric orthopedic surgeon from the University of Texas, San Antonio. We were working on the Haitian clubfoot project together. I was going down doing clubfoot stuff, and he is extremely famous in the pediatric orthopedic world. He wrote a real famous textbook about pediatric fractures, and he called me out of the blue and asked if I wanted to work with him. I was like, absolutely, I would love to work with you. He's one of my heroes in medicine, and he was kind of the face of the organization, and my role was as instructor. So I was teaching people how to do the Ponseti method, and in Haiti at the different clinics. And then we were opening up clinics around the country. We were going to different hospitals to evaluate potential clinic sites. I was seeing all these diabetic patients, and I started asking, okay, what's going on with these people? And really nothing was happening. So I met the only 2 endocrinologists in the whole country for 8 million people, her husband and wife, Nancy and Philippe Larco. And we met several times and got to know each other. And they asked me if I would start working with them. And I was just starting to work with them. And then the earthquake happened in Haiti. So I put my name on an international admissions board, and I got called in to go down for the earthquake the week after the earthquake. And I took over the wound care center at the UN hospital in Port-au-Prince. And the person who had started it was a retired cardiothoracic surgeon who had got into wound care, John McDonald. He was from Florida. And John came back and took over for me after about a week or so. I was down there. I was treating all kinds of wounds that was a pretty amazing experience dealing with a major disaster like that and being on the front lines of that. But John then opened the first wound care center in Haiti and asked me to be in charge of the diabetic limb salvage component of that. So I transitioned from doing clubfoot stuff into wound care and really diabetic limb salvage and trying to teach surgery to the orthopedic surgeons there and also the general surgeons from like functional amputations and things like that.
Wow. So besides Haiti, where else have you gone to do mission work?
So I've been to Iraq twice, and I went to Iraq both times in the middle of the war. So
Really?
in 2005 and 2006, I actually got arrested in Baghdad and put in jail, which is an interesting story.
Oh, no, that we need to hear about.
The first time I went was in October of 2005, and we flew into Amman, Jordan, as a really small group, and we stayed there for a couple of days, and then we flew in from Amman into Baghdad. But from the time we left the United States and got into Baghdad, into Iraq, they changed the visa requirements. So it was myself and a couple teachers and a guy who was leading the group. I was the only medical person. So I went back by myself in June of 2006 and went straight. I didn't go through Baghdad at that time because I learned my lesson, but that was a great trip. But I've also been to the Ukraine. I've been to Costa Rica. I've been to Trinidad. I started in Honduras. That's where I started going. Initially was in Honduras with one of my former residents who asked me to go with him and a group from Little Rock, Arkansas. And I just got hooked. I loved it. I'm actually supposed to go to Kenya in November with Mark Meyerson's group. And I'm also in the process of setting up something in Barbados right now for a diabetic program in Barbados. I'm trying to work on that. And I'm going to incorporate the residency program in that, hopefully.
Oh, what a fun opportunity for the residents. You know, when you told me you got arrested in Baghdad, I had visions of like Midnight Express in Turkey or something.
No, it sounds more glamorous than it was, but it's a funny story. And it's fun to tell, especially students. Students, when they ask me about international stuff, and I like to lead with that, and that gets their attention.
Oh, that's great. One other comment on something you mentioned with Clubfoot is our residents, when we were at North Colorado, used to go see Dr. Ponsetti in Iowa and used to spend a couple days learning his techniques.
I visited him several times, and I got to know him very well, and his wife. And one time I went out there, they took me to dinner. The last time I went out there, he asked me if I wanted to come over to his home for dinner. His wife was as equally famous as him in Spanish literature. She was a professor. And so they asked me to come over to their house for dinner. And I went over there and we were having pizza and beer. And I'm thinking, they were both in their 90s. I was like, this is just an incredible night. I will never forget that night as long as I live. I was having pizza and beer with the most famous pediatric orthopedic surgeon of all time and somebody who's equally as famous in her profession. And then we finished dinner. He asked me if I want to go up to his office and see his original Degas drawings he had in his office. And I was like, yes, let's go do that, Dr. Ponsetti.
Oh, what an awesome experience. That is so fun. So I take it he's one of your mentors.
So I have 4 heroes in medicine, and he's one of them for sure. And John McDonald, who I mentioned earlier, and Kay Wilkins. And the 4th is Mark Meyerson. I've actually gotten to know Mark I lecture a lot and do a lot of lecturing with Mark, and I've gotten involved with his nonprofit. And I just think nobody's added to the knowledge base in foot and ankle that Mark Meyerson has. And I've really gotten to know him well, and I really respect for him for all he's contributed.
Kudos to you. So one of the questions that just popped into my mind is, Patrick, when do you sleep?
question. I get asked that a lot. Uh, yeah, I listened to one of your other podcasts with Dean Treppel, and he made a comment about if you want something done, give it to a busy person. That's kind of how it ends up happening with me.
I think it's human nature. If you need something done, you know who's going to get it done.
Right.
Absolutely. Those are just great stories, and what an opportunity, especially if if you can add some of the residency experiences, that'll be an opportunity that they would never have otherwise.
Right.
So I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit. You've got a flair for some entrepreneurship. I know that you invented the equinus brace. Can you give me a little background on that and
Sure.
how that's come about?
I was running trying to lose weight, and I had posterior tibial tendonitis, and I couldn't get rid of it. And I had orthotics, and I didn't want to stop running because I wanted to try to continue to improve my health. And so I was like, I have equinus like everybody does, so I might as well wear a night splint. So I was wearing a night splint to sleep, and I woke up at like 2 a.m. and I looked down, I'm sleeping on my side with my knee bent. I'm like, this thing is not doing anything. This is a complete waste of time. And I was like, it has to go above your knee. And so that's where the idea originated. And then I kind of added some other things to try to map.
Whoops. I lost you there, Patrick. Oh, you're back. You're back.
Okay.
So Patrick, where we lost you, you said you were starting to add some other features to the equinus brace.
Yeah, like the toe wedge to help supinate the foot to maximize the stretch, and to externally rotate the tibia to help lock the knee into full extension. And so I took my idea to a couple of friends of mine who were sales guys and really savvy business people, and we formed a company together. And it took us. We learned a lot. None of us really knew anything about developing a product and bringing it to market, so we kind of learned on the fly. And it took us 5 or 6 years to actually get it from my idea to a real product and get it manufactured. And it's been an interesting journey. I don't think it's been adapted as well as I hoped it would, just because of the sort of finances of it. It's a more expensive brace, but it has the same reimbursement as like a regular night splint. So that is one of the factors that becomes a problem for some providers, but it really does provide a better result from a treatment standpoint.
It's interesting because I've done some product development, and we have this old joke that it usually takes twice as long and is 3 times more expensive than you think it's going to be.
Absolutely. I learned a lot of stuff I didn't know about that whole journey.
Over the years, whenever I would have an idea or get an NIH grant or something, and I would hire an engineer, I'd have them spend an entire week with me in the clinic, because it's not just cut and dry, right? Every patient shows up in all shades. It's not black and white. And I can't tell you how many times the engineers would develop something and it wasn't working. And I would say, we need to change this. And they'd say, well, but Jeff, it's made the spec. And that's kind of like their standard, right? So, man, it's hard to get something done.
Well, I'm a consultant for a lot of companies in foot and ankle, and I do a lot of product validation testing for them too. And that same thing comes from an engineering standpoint, but like when you're in the surgery trying to do it, that's not practical and that's not going to work. We need to find something that makes sense from both sides.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on getting that to market. That's a quite a challenge and quite a wonderful opportunity for other people, right, to use your brace that you built. So, Patrick, I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about your service to the profession, as if seeing full-time patients and running a residency program and doing this mission work isn't enough, right? Did you start your service to the profession within the state of Indiana, or did you get right to a national level?
No, I started in Indiana, and I actually was at one of our state meetings, and I was complaining about the content of the meeting, and they're like, oh, okay, so you can be on the CE committee now. And I was like, okay, that's fine, but I'm not getting into the politics part of it. Don't ask me to be on the board or anything like that. And then the next thing I knew, I was on the board for our state, and I kind of worked my way up through the board. And when I was president of our state association, our executive director had been our executive director for probably 30 years, passed away unexpectedly. She was a treasurer that we lost, and our state was kind of in a weird situation. So they asked me to stay on as president 2 years. So I was actually president for a couple of years to stabilize things and help sort of lead the process in hiring a new executive director. We have a firm that we use now. And so through that process, and then just all the other stuff I do, I was approached about running for the board of trustees for APMA, and I felt like I was trying to decide, do I go into ACFAS leadership or APMA leadership? And I think it's one or the other for people who want to go into leadership. It's probably a lot to do both of those things because it's such a significant commitment, particularly on the APMA side. It's a 13-year track to the board of trustees. So wow. I decided to go the board of trustees route, and I was elected, and I'm now in my 9th year. So I'm actually slated to be the 100th president of APMA.
No kidding. What year will that be then, Patrick?
3 years. I'll be president in 3 years.
Wow. Congratulations. That's incredible. And when I was younger, right, like we all were, and we were looking up at APMA presidents, I remember, Dr. Kaplan, Dr. Cannon, I mean, all these luminary doctors in the profession. And thank you so much for all your work on behalf of the profession, because that's a long time, 13 years.
It is a long time, and people underappreciate how much time and work we put into it. And my fellow trustees are amazing people to work with, and they're so dedicated to the profession. And, we don't always get everything right, but our intent is always good, and we work really hard on behalf of everyone.
Like anything, anytime you get a group of people together, it's like herding cats, and you got to be kind of good at anticipating the next moves. So I commend you for doing that. That's incredible. The next thing I wanted to ask you about is Upperline Health. The advent of supergroups is rampant throughout the country, and I know Dr. King's involved with Upperline, and you are with Upperline. How does that work exactly? You end up selling your practice to Upperline, and then you work for them? Do you mind commenting on that?
Sure. Yeah, I could see the venture capital was entering podiatry. It's entered other specialties within healthcare, and it was apparent it was starting to happen in podiatry. So I was the sole owner of my practice and trying to grow it as big as I could to make them take the advantage of the opportunity. So I was talking to 3 or 4 different national groups, and I knew people in all of them, and I thought they all had pluses and minuses. I decided the Upperline probably fit my long-term vision the best, and decided to sign with them and sold my practice about 3 years ago now to Upperline. The Upperline thing that really sold me on Upperline was their vision with value-based care, and I we at APMA get a lot of people upset about reimbursement, and most people don't understand that the decline in fee-for-service reimbursement is to drive value-based care. Value-based care is coming whether we like it or not, and we have to be prepared for it. I actually think it's a huge opportunity for the profession, because Upperline was just last year awarded the very first specialty ACO contract. ACOs have always been primary care based, but Medicare revised the whole ACO model about 2 years ago, and they realized that if this is really going to be successful, they have to get specialty groups involved. And our group is the first and only, as of now, specialty organization to get an ACO contract. And part of the reasons they chose Upperline is because Medicare considers podiatry as the primary care provider of the lower extremity. They see the value that we bring to the healthcare profession. And then having that surgical component to it also makes us uniquely qualified for this. And the opportunity is tremendous. And our leadership at Upperline, our CEO, David Thorpe, and our Chief Medical Officer, Mike King, like you had mentioned, and we just have a tremendous team, and we're really taking this advantage of this opportunity. We're setting up the company to be able to handle this ACO management of patients and looking forward to the value-based care. Medicare has said very clearly they want 100% enrollment in ACOs by 2030. And what that means for small practices and individual practitioners, it's going to be difficult because the ACO model is based on risk sharing. And in order to make that a manageable arrangement, you have to have really good data analytics to know what's going to work and not work. And our company is very based on data analytics, and our leadership is very focused on that. So I think we're positioned really uniquely for that.
I think so too. And if you start looking at comorbidities, diabetes, the costs of limb amputations, prosthetics, I mean, the costs are through the roof, of course. So I congratulate Upperline, and that's great that you're involved. I know you'll make a big difference for them. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So I had another thing we thought. We play amateur psychologist here sometimes on the show, and we've been asking, I've been asking some of my guests, because they're leaders in the profession, if they'd be willing to do the Big 5 personality test. And really, it tells us things we already knew that were self-evident, right? So I thought it was funny when you sent me a couple of the results. If you don't mind, I was just going to make a couple of comments, and then you can comment on my comments. So I noticed that you were extremely high in extroversion, particularly assertiveness, which means you've got a take charge attitude.
That's true, and I think my fellow board members would agree to that. Yeah, I tend to drive the boat a lot on that kind of stuff. But yes, it's something I've grown into. I don't think that I had that personality earlier in my career. It's something that has evolved throughout my career.
Okay, very good. Because, not all of these are innate, right? We learn them through environment. The next one I was going to comment on is you were very high in conscientiousness. And the two components of conscientiousness were industriousness, like inventing things, right? Like your berets. And then orderliness, meaning you've got a penchant to keep things in order. What do you think about that?
Well, you talk to my wife, she would confirm that. I like structure. I like order. I eat at the same places, usually on this. I go from office to office. Like I spend a half day in each office. And so I move around a lot, but I have different restaurants I go to for lunch each day. And I usually go to the same place. They know when I'm coming in, they know what I'm going to order. The students are always amazed because I always take students to lunch and buy their lunch for them. And they're like, they know you here and you don't even have to order. And I'm like, yeah, it's because I come here every Tuesday. This is where I eat lunch. But that structure, it's the same thing for me in practice too. I do, the same things because I know they work. There's evidence-based medicine behind them, and that's the structure of my practice.
That's fabulous. So of the Big 5 personalities, we've hit on two of them, right? Conscientiousness and extroversion. The other one you were very high in is openness, and the components of openness were intellectual capacity and aesthetics.
I like to think that I have intellectual capacity.
I always say I have it sometimes.
Yeah. And aesthetics. The questions regarding that were interesting. I love music. I know nothing about music, though I can't read music. I can't play any instruments, but I'm a big Deadhead. Those people who know me know that I'm a big Deadhead. I'm actually going to go see the Grateful Dead at Wrigley Field on Friday and Saturday. And then I'm seeing them in Cincinnati on Tuesday, and then here in Indianapolis at the end of the month. So I love the Grateful Dead, and I love all types of music, but it's really important. I love theater. I love movies. I love the reading. So going to museums. So those things are important to me as well.
So that concludes our amateur psychology 5 minutes. How's that sound? 5 minutes for first 5 personalities. And that's fun. I've enjoyed doing that, and I think I hope you enjoyed it too, because I thought it was just kind of fun.
It was fun.
In fact, when I was a resident, Patrick, at Kern Hospital, in order to be a resident there, you had to take the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Test.
Oh, wow.
And I always thought, that's not a bad idea for residents predicting people to come in. But as you know, that test just took it's 15 or 20 minutes. I just had enjoyed doing it.
Yeah, it was fun.
So I wanted to ask you about challenges in the profession. Some, that it's so great that COVID's behind us. We've got some winds at our back. We can start opening up some opportunities for shadowing experiences. Your thoughts on the short-term future coming ahead of us and actually long-term future for podiatry?
Well, I'm super bullish on the long-term future. I think we are uniquely positioned for the changes that are coming in healthcare. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for our profession to be really solidified as a primary care provider for the lower extremity. As far as the short-term concerns. So the big thing is student recruitment. We've talked about that. We're working together on that. I'm the chair of a new foundation that was started by the APMA House of Delegates in 2023, and we're assembling the board. So I'm the chair of that board, and we're hoping to work with you in the AACPM to help really stabilize that. I think, the big thing is it's a messaging problem. People just aren't aware and what a great career it is, and the opportunity that podiatry provides, and really the lifestyle that podiatry provides. It's pretty unique, I think, in healthcare, that and it's just a messaging and getting that story out. I always talk about how I have 2 residents now who are legacies, and I had probably 4 or 5 students last year come through who are legacies, and I already have some that have come through this year who are legacies. Now, a lot of people are sending their kids to my program because they know me to rotate as an extern, but what parents going to have their child go into a bad profession? I think that speaks volumes. That legacy story is really, I think, tells a lot about the profession. So getting the student recruitment, I think if we have a really structured plan and we all work together, I think we can stabilize that and make it really where it should be, comparable to our allopathic and osteopathic colleagues. And then, just strengthening the organizations. One of the things that I think all the organizations within podiatry, and actually all organizations, suffer from is participation from younger generations, being members of organizations, and then giving back to their respective professions, and trying to get them to understand the importance of that, and why being a member is important. I always kind of describe APMA as like the offensive and defensive line. We're in the trenches doing the work to make sure that you can do the things you want to do from a practice standpoint, that you get paid for what you do, and that you don't get cut out of any insurance programs or federal health policies and things like that. And in order to fight those fights, you have to have the resources to do that, not only from a financial standpoint, but also from a volunteer standpoint. So it's really important. And that's the one thing that I really try to instill in my residents as they're coming through, and the students, frankly. All the students spend a week with me. They follow me around for a whole week. We eat lunch together. They're in my office, in my private office, and we talk. And I always try to tell them the importance of giving back to the profession and to pay it forward to the people following them.
Oh, that's extremely well said. If you don't mind, just a couple extra minutes. Your presentation that you gave at the APMA meeting in March and then presented to the deans on messaging and branding, I thought it was one of the best presentations I've seen in such a long time. Can you make a couple comments on that? Because I found it to be spot on, and it's exactly what our profession needs.
So I was originally put in charge of a task force from APMA, which has evolved into the foundation. But I started just talking to as many people as I could and finding out, how can we fix this problem? Because it seems like a very fixable problem. And I realized that it was sort of a messaging problem, a PR problem, if you will. But also, I learned after talking to some people at Google through a connection with Ross Taubman, who's a past APMA president and the CEO of PICA, that it's probably a data analytics problem too. We need to understand who our target is, and when we should talk to them, and how we should talk to them, and what they're, where they are online. Where can we meet them online? And instead of just trying to throw this big net out there, and be a little more precise in our messaging. And so I met with a company that the Google executives recommended, and we've had several conversations, and they help to define that. They help to, if they look at all your data from all the different organizations, and they put out, here's the people you need to talk to, when you should talk to them, how you should talk to them, where you should talk to them. And then your marketing firm gives you the messaging and the profession branding, and those things together, I think, are going to provide the yield and return on investment. And I know your approach is a boots on the ground, and I think those things can be simultaneously working together if we have the resources to do so.
Oh, I think so too. We might as well take advantage of all these tremendous intelligence that we have within the computer space. And so I commend you for that, and I look forward to working together, Patrick. That's
Absolutely.
Great. We're nearing the end of the interview. Any last words on your end about the profession, or to prospective students or practitioners? It's your call.
Sure. it's a great profession, first of all. And like anything, there's no profession in medicine that's perfect, but I wouldn't change it. If you work hard and you do the right thing and you always put your patients first, and if you give back to the profession and you help mentor those who are following in your footsteps, it'll be a very rewarding career.
I'm going to use that as a snippet in like a little short on YouTube. How's that sound?
Sounds perfect.
It sounds good. Patrick, hey, I really, really appreciate your time and energy and expertise and joining me on Dean's Chat today. And to our listeners, thank you always for tuning into Dean's Chat. We will continue to bring you the leaders and the voices in podiatric medicine. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. And if you're on Apple Podcast or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating. Patrick, I'm going to send you one of these Dean's Chat cups for you can drink in coffee in the morning.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you are so welcome. And until next week, cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.